to turn the microphone over to Michael Lucas. Tell us all about SSH.
Well, I do have to say, if I give you great pleasure, I'm really sorry. You deserve a better life. Hi, folks. My name's Michael Lucas. I did 20 years as a system admin and network administrator, and now I'm writing computer books full-time. And every so often I go on this periodic rant about SSH and how you're not using it right. So, I'm going to start off with a couple questions here because yesterday I got curious and I wondered who was giving the talk, the other talk tonight at the meeting, and there was nobody listed. So I reached out to Jim and he said, "Oh no, you've got the whole evening." So,
lucky you.
Yes, lucky me. Fortunately, this is boiled down from a 4-hour course, so I had a ready source of slides. But I'm going to risk throwing all of my slides away and ask a couple questions here. How many of you folks are using passwords with SSH?
I'll admit it.
Sometimes it's okay. Okay. I may skip through some parts of this because many of you are already decent people and have stopped using passwords and making the internet a worse place. So, I wrote a book on SSH. It's small. It's printed on thin, soft paper for easy recycling. I'm also a founding member of the brand new Southeast Michigan BSD user group, semibug.org. The web page will give you visual poisoning. You have been warned. So, let's talk about SSH in general quick. It's a tool, like a hammer, like a saw. Like any tool, it can be used for good or evil. How many of you folks have been in a corporate security audit where SSH was an issue for the auditor?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of auditors don't like this particular hammer because it's really good at breaking holes in walls. On the other hand, when everything goes completely to hell, SSH can help you glue your network back together again and save the day. So, I'm going to talk about tools and techniques tonight. SSH responsibly. If your organization has rules against opening a tunnel out to the internet and browsing porn sites without going through the corporate proxy, please obey that rule. Or decide ahead of time that you really don't care about the job, because apparently this is a great time to be job hunting. So, anytime I give a talk having anything to do with authentication, somebody asks about password managers. And the talk for the next 15 to 20 minutes degenerates into this argument over which is the best and which is worse, and are these even a good idea? So, NANOG, the North American Network Operators Group, is one of the best groups of actual hands-on networking practitioners today. And the general consensus on that list is that the best password manager is KeePass. I've answered the question. Please don't ask it again. Thank you. Why is it the best? I'm going to steer you to the NANOG mailing list archives, because this discussion destroyed the list for nearly 6 months, and there is more detail than you could possibly want to know.
I can research that when she's taking it.
So, I'm going to speed through a couple slides here. Encryption 101. Plain text is the readable stuff. If you can't read plain text, you have another problem. Ciphertext is the encoded, unreadable text. Algorithm is the method for transforming one to the other. And the key is a secret string used as an algorithm seed. So a symmetric encryption algorithm, you played with this even as a kid. A is 1, B is 2. The little smiley-faced pile of poop is C. I really don't want to know what kind of codes kids today are going to come up with emojis and whatnot. But the nice thing about symmetric algorithms is they're very fast. Especially if you're a computer, you rip right through this.
They might not be as secure though, I imagine.
Oh, they're not as secure. So long as you have a way to transfer the key back and forth securely, and so long as you don't use the symmetric algorithm for too long, it's pretty secure. Asymmetric is the result of the fact that math gets really, really weird at really big numbers. You have a different method to encrypt and decrypt messages, and a different key. 2 keys, each is used in one stage of the process. Asymmetric seems often much more secure than symmetric, but it is slow. It is hard to churn through these big numbers. Public key encryption is built on top of asymmetric. You have 2 keys and you give one of them away. You put it on your web page. You hand it out to everyone in the world. You spray paint it on the wall and have to do community service to clean the wall. The other key you keep very, very secret. And since you can use either key to either decrypt or encrypt so long as the other key is used to reverse the process, this means that you can securely exchange information with anyone within the limits of the message exchange mechanism. We have a whole bunch of message exchange mechanisms like SSH, SSL, PGP. All of these are built on asymmetric encryption, and there are many different asymmetric encryption algorithms. So, SSH uses encryption by using public key encryption for the initial session setup. In this session, they agree on a secret to use for symmetric encryption. They exchange a bunch of traffic with symmetric encryption, and then they negotiate a new symmetric key. So, every so often someone says, oh, I hear Blowfish is the best encryption algorithm ever. And they prioritize this in their SSH stacks. And they either get broken into, their SSH breaks, or people laugh at them. The algorithms that SSH uses are very carefully chosen, and they're chosen in the order that they appear in, because otherwise things go badly. Don't muck around with things like encryption settings. People who know a lot more math than, well, you know, maybe not the gentleman from the university, but people who know a lot more math than most of us have figured this out. Okay, let's talk about SSH in particular. The main system-wide configuration files for SSH. SSH_config is the host-wide client config for the OpenSSH client on a Unix-style system. I'm sorry? You'll also see a bunch of keys. SSH_host_something key. The something is the encryption algorithm for that key. One file is the .pub, that's the public file that gets shared with the world. The one that's not labeled pub is secret. Just because it doesn't say secret doesn't mean it's not secret. Check the permissions on these files if you have any doubts. There's also SSHD config, which is the server configuration.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm sure all of you have broken at some point or another.
You should tell them.
Okay, OpenSSH Server. As I said, I stuffed things into these slides in a hurry yesterday, which means that this is reversed from the previous slide where it should have been. Thank you, Jim. Any Unix-like OS today includes OpenSSH. You can also get it for Windows through Cygwin, SSH for Windows. And most interestingly, Microsoft has committed to supporting OpenSSH in .NET. And so before long, you will be able to type these 40-character Windows commands in quotes after an SSH-C and execute it on other hosts without logging in. So, I'm going to be a little weird here and start about debugging the SSH daemon before we look at anything you can do with it.
I don't like the server though.
Sorry?
No.
So, the -F flag to SSHD says, use an alternate configuration file. So what you can do is, you copy your config file off to the side, you make your change, and you can test using this config file without interrupting your main SSH service. And the -P flag says run it on an alternate port. So you can't run two SSHs on the same port, port 22, but in this example I've run my test instance on port 222. So I can make sure it works before I kick all my users off the system and lock myself out. And these days with virtual machines, it's not that big a deal, especially with IPMI and such. But how many of you have ever done the drive of shame to the colo in the middle of the night because you locked yourself out of remote management? There's an awful lot of young people in this room. You don't know how good you have it. So, another useful setting that a lot of people miss is -D, especially with these test configs and on alternate ports. -D puts SSHD in debugging mode, and it prints out exactly what it is doing. It will show you the key exchanges. It will tell you what's happening. So if you have a client that can't connect, you can start SSHD in debugging mode. It only stays running for one connection. But at the end, when it hangs, it tells you why the client can't connect. And yes, you may not understand the message. You may have to fall back onto copy and paste into Stack Exchange. But the information is there, especially if you're playing with different SSH settings. So, here's a few things in general on SSH. SSH comes in two protocol versions, version 1 and version 2. How many of you allow version 1?
Only on VMS machines that are really old.
Okay, VMS, you have another whole set of problems. This is the first time nobody in the room has raised their hand. You can all give yourselves a pat on the back. Another useful option is the allow and deny groups. For example, I run SSH on a lot of machines that have a lot of user accounts. And I don't want anyone with a user account to be able to SSH in. On BSD systems, wheel is the group of users who are allowed to use the root password. So, if you don't have the right to become root, you may not SSH into this machine, because you shouldn't be SSH'd in anyway. One of the more troublesome options, especially in this day of DevOps and cloud computing and just spin up another virtual machine, is permit root login, allowing someone to SSH in as root. This is generally a bad idea. It is hard to track. Even if it's a single dedicated purpose machine, it is terrible practice, especially when even your automated processes can log in as a regular user and run sudo or pfexec or whatever. Now, we were talking about Ansible earlier. I had a nice Ansible setup, and we had a dedicated user for Ansible. It always ran sudo. It can be done. Don't be lazy. And lastly, use DNS. This seems like a nice thing where it shows up in the log that, oh, it wasn't this IP that logged in, it was this host name. And that seems nice, except when your DNS breaks, all of your SSH logins get really, really slow because the DNS query has to time out. And this is particularly pernicious if you're trying to SSH into the DNS server so you can fix DNS. Host names are easily spoofed anyway. Don't use DNS in your SSHD config. On the client side, it's fine. If your SSH client doesn't have DNS, well, if you're supposed to be fixing the DNS, you probably know the IP of your DNS server. This is a number that is probably burned into your soul through repeated trauma. Okay. One of the more confusing things that people seem to find useful is restricting and controlling access by users and groups. How late are we? I've never given an 1.5 to 2 hour talk before, so I have to keep a bit of an eye on the time, I'm afraid. Okay. The deny allow users and deny allow groups is very, very useful, especially on these machines where, say you get your users from LDAP. You may have thousands of users available on the system, but you only want a really tiny number of people to get in this particular system. And what's more, the list of people on this particular system is probably slightly different from every other system. We all talk about the joy of having identical machines, and they're really, really hard to achieve. So, rules in SSHD config are processed in order listed in the config file, and the first match wins. You have these 4 keywords: deny users, allow users, deny groups, and allow groups. So, I have this demo system with just a few users. Wheel, who are the administrators, staff, who's everybody who works there, the support crew, and the lone guy in billing. So, if I don't want to let the billing people in on this machine, I put one statement in my SSHD config. Deny users. This guy, he can't get in. And that's nice until you get another billing user. It's much better to deny by groups all the time. Even if that group only has one user, the day will arrive when you add a second user to some other group, and that will save you all the time you spend blocking by groups instead. Allow groups wheel, we touched on that before. But the key thing is, if the only access control statement in your SSHD config is an allow statement, that flips SSHD to say, oh, it's default deny. Normally, everyone can get in, but if you make a point of saying that, say, Jeff may log in, and you just list Jeff, well, you obviously mean nobody else. So, we've got a special case where the user, PK Dick, is simply not allowed to log into this machine ever again. He was bad last time, and no. But he's part of the support group. So I put a rule in first that says deny this one user who is on my pool list. And then I specifically allow the support group in. So you can also restrict users by IP address, which is very useful for processes like rsync. Rsync is one of those troublesome things that's really useful, but it wants to run as root. You have to have some sudo in there. You really don't want this account just able to log in from anywhere. So you lock it down to this one IP address, this one account on this one machine. You can use host names, but again, when DNS breaks, you're kind of hosed. You can also do conditional configuration. On a bunch of my machines, for various reasons, I wanted X11 forwarding. Does anybody else here use Emacs? Okay, you understand. I don't want I'm okay with Emacs. But if I just turn on X11 forwarding unconditionally, some dumbass goes and runs Wireshark, gets the box rooted, and I have to go deliver a beating. I don't really mind delivering beatings, but you know, my hands get sore. So, I can use X11 forwarding, nobody else. So, let's talk about protecting SSHD. The internet is full of SSH servers facing the public internet. How many of you have heard of the Hail Mary cloud? Of course Jeff has.
We see it all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And everyone who looks at their logs here, how many of you run SSH servers on the public internet? Okay. The Hail Mary cloud is the thing that logs into your server and tries brute force guessing passwords. And you get a few logins from one IP, a few logins from a different IP. It is coordinated and distributed. So all of these systems that say, oh, you can only try 6 times and then we block your IP, that's fine. The Hail Mary cloud moves on to the next bot and keeps attacking. And yes, it's a long shot. There's a reason why it's called the Hail Mary cloud, but a surprising number of machines get broken into by this thing. If you have username and password, if you permit username and password authentication on your host, this thing is going to poke at you forever. And given forever, they can break into your machine. So, this is a problem. Now, the way around this is to disable passwords. Recent versions of, by recent I mean like 10 years or so, but there are bots running out there that are older. Recent versions will connect to an SSH server and say, oh, you only allow key-based authentication. Never mind. And they go away. They give up. I like it when people give up and walk away. And we'll talk about key-based auth in a moment. Privilege separation. OpenSSH in particular has to deal with a specific problem. Any UNIX service that binds to a port 1024 or below has to deal with this problem. It needs root privilege to attach to that port. So it's listening to the network as root. This means anyone who breaks into it has broken into a root level process. They own your machine. What OpenSSH does is something called privilege separation. It starts as root. It attaches to the port, and only the part that needs to listen to the network runs as root. And that's a very small piece of code, carefully audited. And there are a lot of people who want to break that code. So whenever a connection request comes in, it hands it off to an unprivileged process that handles the user login. For your own SSH service, if the world doesn't need to connect to it, why let the world connect to it? Use a packet filter. OpenSSH respects TCP wrappers on most Unix-like systems. Now, if it's your company hosts, restrict it to only allowing connections from your company, from your VPN. Don't welcome the world into your SSH port. That's how you catch things. Okay, and one common protection is to change the port that SSH runs on. The Hail Mary cloud pokes at other ports. I've run SSH servers on other ports, and eventually they will find you and they start poking.
Not only do they poke, but they, there are services that go probe,
Yes.
systems and say, oh, this thing's listening to an SSH. They don't actually have to hit your server. Someone else hit your server
Yes.
and recorded that for posterity, and
Yes.
then you get poked.
Lots of ways to find that out. Now, in all fairness, I run an SSH server that listens on, let me see, port 25, port 80, port 445, port 23, and a whole 110, a whole bunch of other ports. This machine's entire function is to listen to about 200 SSH ports, so that when I'm behind almost any naive firewall,
Yep.
I'm out.
Done it. Yep. That's there.
This is why you really shouldn't hire me. This is why I'm a full-time writer now. It's just happier for everybody involved. So, how many PuTTY users have we got in the room? Okay, how many OpenSSH Client users? What do the rest of you use?
MOBA external.
Well, extra, yeah, okay. OpenSSH.
MOBA external,
Oh, MOBA extra. Oh, right, okay.
yeah. Apps on phones.
Yeah, apps on phones. If you're an Android user, ConnectBot,
This one.
VX Connect bot.
VX ConnectBot.
Yeah.
Yes.
Terraterm on Windows.
Yes.
There was also just a recent PuTTY security patch, 0.66 is out now.
Yes. PuTTY does not update itself. Please update your PuTTY.
Windows PuTTY does not.
Windows PuTTY. Okay. So we're about half and half. I'm going to try to give equal attention to both. Okay, server keys. You connect to an SSH server for the first time, and you get this notice that says, "Hi, here is the key to your server. Please verify this 256 character hexadecimal string of gibberish and make sure that every single character in it is correct." Has anybody here actually done that? I did it as part of writing the SSH book because I needed to be able to honestly say I had done it. And having done it, I can authoritatively state that it's really terrible.
Be a masochist.
I did it once. I write books. Yes, I'm a masochist. It's included. I come out here and talk to you people. So, it can be done. In the real world, you as the sysadmin need to automate this. Start with SSH keygen. -LF. Grab the fingerprint from the key file. Add it to a file. You can also use the program SSH Keyscan, which lets you sit at a desk and scan the SSH servers on your network and capture those fingerprints. That requires either you A, trust your network and trust that the remote server has not already been compromised, which depends entirely on your network. I'm used to running servers on the naked internet working for ISPs. This is an invalid assumption. It may be that behind the firewall at Ford, perhaps they're better off. I don't know. I've never hacked into Ford's network. I have no clue, sorry. But once you have these keys, you make them available. The usual suggestions are a secure website. They tell you don't send it out over email, don't put it unencrypted on the public internet. Really, the only thing you can do is automate it. Those scans will generate a known hosts file for SSH. You can distribute that. How many of you are using Puppet, Ansible? The known host file is easy Ansible bait. It's copy this file to all the hosts and now you're up to date. It is well worth doing. It's an easy security game. Similarly, PuTTY. PuTTY's known host cache is a registry file. If you are using Windows and you have to worry about making sure all of these hosts are really the hosts they claim to be, grab that registry file, go to your Windows guy and say, hey, I need all the people on the Unix team to have this lump. And they will make it happen, some domain admin policy, honkety whatever, I don't know. I try not to get into that. So, both clients, any client, presents the key fingerprint. But now and then you get a warning that the key fingerprint has changed. How many of you have seen that message that says, oh, the fingerprint has changed, what, doom, doom, doom? How many of you have said, yeah, whatever, and hit the new key?
How many
Yeah,
disabled
I know why.
that?
Yes. How many of you disabled the whining? Okay. There's a few reasons why this might be happening, but every one of them means you need to stop and think. The sysadmin may have screwed up. If someone else manages the machine, this is a great chance for you to force them to admit that they are mortal. Every sysadmin needs to do this every now and then for their own good. Maybe the client is wrong. Maybe your client has been compromised. Maybe you're getting corruption in files or registry. Something could be happening there. Did they upgrade the server? It wasn't too long ago that OpenSSH added the ECDSA keys. And after I ran an upgrade, all of a sudden the network monitoring system lit up in red, and the support staff received a couple hundred emails saying, keys have changed, the world is ending. And well, yes. It took us a while to figure out what had happened because, of course, the servers install these new keys automatically. Round-robin DNS, that's another common culprit. And the last thing is perhaps the intruder controls the server, perhaps you have a man-in-the-middle attack, perhaps something is seriously wrong. It's perfectly fine to admit that for some reason the keys on this host have needed to be regenerated. It is better, if you are in doubt, to create a new host key for your clients to connect to than use one that may be compromised.
I'll add another to the list. System is a lab system that gets restated several times a day. And you have no idea.
Yes, you people who are working in labs, and yeah, you make your own problems.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about OpenSSH as the client. Ever so often, OpenSSH doesn't do what you think it should. And you scream and wail and go running for Stack Exchange and read the man page and check the book that idiot Lucas wrote, and it's not in there either. Of course it's not. So, how do you find out what's going on? SSH-V, verbose mode, will print the debugging information for your client to the screen, intermixed with your session. Now you can redirect that to another file. But if you actually read the output, it will tell you things. And usually you can figure out why you're not connecting from them. So, at the client level, you have a couple different config files. There's the global one in Etsy, and you can have an individual personal config in .ssh that will override the global settings. Now your sysadmin has carefully handcrafted the global configuration file for your convenience, but if you want to shoot yourself in the foot, go right ahead. You have that option. Almost all configuration options that make sense for SSHD work in the SSH client. One common thing with the client is you may have a different username on a different server. So if I have to connect to a customer server, I get them to assign me a username. Oddly enough, it's always something like jerkface. You can use the username, the @ sign in the server name, or the -L argument to set the username. You can also do this in the config file, so that OpenSSH will just handle it for you. I've made copious use of this. One of my automotive jobs, the organization had 5 different standards for usernames, depending on the type of system, the operating system, and when it was deployed. This is the only, this user option is the only thing that saved my sanity. You can use the -P flag to change port. And set that in the config file as well. So, PuTTY is the de facto standard for Windows SSH clients. There are others. Some of them are better. Some of them cost money. PuTTY is the common denominator. It's not by the folks who write OpenSSH. It's still pretty good. When you download it, download the full installer. There's a couple tools in the full installer.
What do you mean by that, by not by the OpenSSH?
OpenSSH is written by the folks from OpenBSD. They have one of the most secure network operating systems in the world. They've identified entirely new classes of ways to break into systems and swept their own operating system and the SSH code for those classes of bugs. OpenBSD and anything they write is really, really hard to break into. So, I would say the people, my wife is a psychiatric nurse practitioner. She informs me that paranoia is the feeling that people are out to get you. In the case of the internet, that happens to be true.
Yeah.
But you're still paranoid. It's just well-founded. So,
But you're saying that PuTTY basically doesn't meet the OpenBSD standards.
it just
PuTTY was
wasn't
written by one guy.
There's one guy who writes PuTTY, and he does a pretty good job of it. Every now and then, there's a security update for it because he missed something. Now, a client is a little easier to secure than the server. Nobody is probing the internet looking for your open PuTTY install that's listening for connections.
Read the FAQ that he provided, it's a hoot.
Yes, his FAQ is worth reading. As I said, there are better clients out there, but this is pretty standard. I use it myself. I also use OpenSSH Client on Windows. It's a question of what's going on at the moment.
Is it more applicable to the Windows environment as opposed to, let's say, Unix?
PuTTY runs on Unix-like systems. It's a little prettier. PuTTY runs on almost anything. But it is, most Unix-like users use OpenSSH. It comes with the system. So if you use PuTTY, one of the things that really annoys me is having to go in and make the same change for every single setting, or every single connection. You can set, when you first open PuTTY, there's a session called default settings. If you change something in that, it takes effect for all sessions that follow. It doesn't go and retroactively write sessions you've previously created. But, for example, on all of my systems, I have the same username. I set that as the default. And then save that in the default settings. On all of my hosts, I want X11 forwarding turned on in the SSH client. I control whether that's available on the server or not. So, like the OpenSSH client, PuTTY has debugging. There is an event log in the upper left-hand button. And you can also do a session log, where you have to start the session log before opening the connection. But this will give you all sorts of good stuff about the inside of PuTTY. PuTTY keeps all of its config in the registry. If you are a Windows user and you have a new laptop and you don't want to set up all these connections again, oh please no. Grab the registry key, export it, take it to your new machine, plug it in. And yes, you can distribute this via Active Directory. I'm assured by the AD admins I know that this is very easy. Okay. Are there any questions on what we've touched on so far?
So it has to do with, you have a system that you're trying to determine, do diagnostics, right?
Yes.
And use SSH to diagnose the system is up, you know, whether it's working properly, whether you can connect to it, things like that. Can you just maybe go through like a real quick hit list on what you would do to, I mean, so you touched on that a little bit, but just interested in knowing a little bit more about, I want to find out if my SSH is running properly on my server.
Okay. Is SSH running properly on the server? Well, the short answer is, if you get a command line prompt, it's running correctly. If you don't, it isn't. But the interesting question is, how far in the process does it get? I have seen I've seen machines break in such a way that the SSH connection seems to complete. And I can log in at the console, but SSH doesn't give me a command prompt. And at the end it says that it's hanging trying to allocate a VTY. It's because it has real terminal sessions on the console, but it can't allocate a virtual terminal for your SSH session. The client may say, okay, I've connected to port 22, and I'm talking to the SSH daemon. Hello, SSH daemon. Hello. And nothing's answering there, so you know that the connection died very early in the process. Perhaps the process that listens to port 22 is open, but it can't spawn the lower privileged listener. The most common error I have seen, or that I have discovered through SSH debugging mode, is timeout waiting for DNS. Going back to that, use DNS, no.
I will say that properly also means not doing extra things like unexpected, like being a Trojan SSHD that
Yes.
logs everything. That's where debugging can help as well, where you know, oh, why are you talking to this thing here?
Yes.
Yeah.
I would encourage you, not just for SSH, but for any process that you're responsible for, run it a couple times in debugging mode. See what normal looks like. Because until you know what normal looks like, it's really hard to know what is abnormal. I mean, when they were trying to figure out that my appendix had gone bad, the doctor looked at the CAT scan and said, well, that ain't right. Because he knew what was supposed to be there, and he didn't know what was going on in me, but he knew that didn't look like anything he'd seen before.
They just hammer you right here, and they just
Well,
pound right
that's
there,
what-
and you pull in pain, and then they find out.
Yeah, I didn't have that.
Then they know right away that
Yeah.
you got a problem with your appendix.
Yes, but my pain was over here.
That's pancreatic, that's not.
Oh, the pancreas was fine. See, you have to know what normal looks like before.
So you had referred pain.
I had referred pain. I'm special.
In a non-typical location. That can't
Absolutely.
occur. It's kind of like how you get a heart attack, but you feel it maybe in your arm instead
Yes.
of in your chest.
And your software can do the same thing.
I see.
But you have to know the equivalent of a hand should have 5 fingers before you can say, well, that doesn't look right. So run all of your software in debugging mode a couple times, copy the output. Maybe you'll never need it. Maybe you'll wish you had it.
Be curious, that's all.
It's also
Yeah, be
swing
curious.
located.
I mean,
Does it work?
as sysadmins, I love to find a new knob Say, hey, what happens if I twiddle this? Oh, okay, no, let's not touch that again. For the record, virtualization is a wonderful thing. You don't want to know how we did this when all we had were production servers.
Lots of prayer.
Yes, lots of prayer. So, copying files over SSH. FTP actually predates TCP/IP. Has anyone here used a connection over NP? Okay, good. It's died along. It's long overdue for death. The file transfer protocol ran on the internet protocol that existed before TCP/IP, and it was forward ported.
And there you'll see the legacy of that in things like .NET-RC files.
Yes.
TechNet was bad enough.
So, is anybody here still using rsync? Okay. How about RCP? RSH? Jeff, Mr. O'Connor really should know better. Please hit him.
Those aforementioned lab sheets.
Yeah, there's no reason to have a lab. Okay, the whole reason OpenSSH exists is to kill our login, RCP, and all of those protocols. If we have time, I'll go into that story. Because I think it's a great example of how a small group of people can change the entire world. So, apps like rsync can travel over SSH. That's one way to copy files. But there are two SSH-specific copy tools, SCP and SFTP. How many of you use SCP? Okay, you're all wrong. SCP was written for a direct drop-in replacement of RCP, the unencrypted, unauthenticated remote copy protocol. That is why SCP uses different command line flags than any other program in the SSH suite, because it's stealing them from RCP. Every so often, someone will scream, why does SCP use a dash capital P to set the port instead of the small p, like everything else? And the answer is, well, this program was not meant for you. SFTP is designed specifically for SSH. It's a newer protocol. It is actively maintained and improved over time. The SCP program itself is basically maintained. I mean, they don't let it rot, but the protocol itself is dead. And a lot of people really wish that SCP itself would die, but so many people picked it up when you really weren't supposed to, and now they live with it.
Kind of put in a gray area. It's a little maintained and little isn't. Is it a 0 or a 1?
It's grab a rabbit, turn it over, rub its feet, and
In other words, kind of quantum in nature.
Yes. Use
You
SFTP.
put one in, you get two answers
It's
out.
in maintenance mode.
Maintenance mode.
Yeah.
SFTP looks a lot like regular FTP. You can also use it like SCP to just copy a file on the fly. If you're Windows, PuTTY, yes.
Why do you recommend that over rsync through SSH?
It's a different tool. Copying a file, you want a tool like a shovel, which is what SFTP is for. Rsync is like the whole wheelbarrow. You want to pick up the whole directory tree and shuffle it over. Yes, you could put that one scoop in rsync and trundle it over in the wheelbarrow. And that's a really horribly mixed metaphor. But there's no reason you can't, but people will look at you kind of funny.
I'm used to that.
Yeah. Thank you. I wasn't going to say that on camera, Brian. Thank you.
You say it's free for personal use, restrictions to distribute. What is its license?
Well, let me go over the first part of the slide first. If you're a Windows user, there are command line apps like PSCP that are included with PuTTY. If you want a nice GUI app, use WinSCP. It gives you nice right-click menus that say, send to SCP, copy to this host. It gives you the Explorer style window or the Commander style split window. The license on WinSCP is basically, you can't hand it off to your clients. You must tell your clients to go download it themselves.
What is it like? I mean, there's like freeware, there's open, there's.
I would have to go back and look at the license
What is the
again.
license?
It's probably some proprietary license.
It is commercial code.
So it is proprietary, it's not
Michael,
new or
you-
anything like
You
that.
got about 35, 40 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
We probably need to.
Yeah. Okay, key-based authentication. Most of you are using keys, so I'm going to kind of tread lightly through here. I'm going to make an offer for everybody in this room who is not using keys. You all saw how everybody around you was using key-based authentication. Grab one of them and get them to help you if you need it. This is really not hard. And once you use key-based authentication, you will not understand how you've lived without it. Is there anybody here who uses keys for login for more than a couple months and says, passwords were just better and easier? Does anybody say that? You are the first person to ever raise your hand.
But the reason is I'm in a lab where everything is just,
Doesn't count.
everything just, we
Yeah.
just create stuff on the fly.
Labs
throw it
don't
away.
count. Actually, your lab is poorly designed. You should be using a deployment system that installs your keys for you.
So I have to build a deployment system, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay, but you're the first person who's ever been shameless enough to raise his hand. I applaud you. So, actually, I should go back. Passwords are weak. Yes.
What do you mean by a key? Is it a physical device?
No.
A software key, a public-private key pair exactly like used in, a different format, but basically just like what's used in a web server or for your SSH server to identify itself. Basically, you have a public and a private key. Your public key you give to the server. Your private key you keep for yourself, encrypted with a passphrase.
Okay.
When you want to log in, you use your passphrase to unlock your key. The key is encrypted with a pretty straightforward, the private key is encrypted with a pretty straightforward algorithm. You enter your passphrase, and SSH uses your passphrase as the key to decrypt the key. If your private key file is stolen,
Regenerate keys.
that encrypted file is useless without the passphrase. You can create a new key, you're done. Your passphrase should be too long to guess by brute force, too complex to guess, and too long to shoulder surf. And for all of you shoulder surfers out there, I use a Dvorak keyboard, sucks to be you. Use numbers.
You forgot, easy to type on your phone.
Nope, that's notebooks. Notebooks in your luggage.
Is that for security through obscurity, or is it you do it for the speed?
For typing speed. So, this slide keeps getting mentioned, or sorry, this comic keeps getting mentioned whenever the topic of passphrases comes up. So I gave up and I put it in the presentation. I hope you're happy. We've all used these passphrases, like passwords up in the upper left that are hard to remember and complex. A string of common English words that is longer is actually more secure than that 8 characters of gibberish.
Not true anymore.
Depends on how you're using it and how much you have. For example, don't use a cliche, don't use a saying. "He's dead, Jim" is not a passphrase. That's an invitation to be robbed. Now, here is my passphrase from 16 years ago. "Come closer, my darling child, but not too close, for I too cannot be trusted." It's a mix of 2 different translations of the book that largely created the Surrealist movement back in the 1860s. I can still remember this, including where all the damn commas are. You are gonna have a hard time guessing that or brute forcing it. For the record, I am not recommending that you read this book, just that's where I got it from. And my current passphrase is longer and more obscure than that, but yet, if I forget it, I can easily obtain it again. So, find something that is unique to you. An old book that you inherited from your grandpa that went out from 18-something. A magazine, a Life magazine from the year your dog was born. Grab a piece of text, play with it a little.
Use a nursery rhyme. Modified
A modified nursery rhyme, okay, but there's a lot of nursery rhymes, and it better not be hickory dickory dock.
How about a personal golf swing key mantra that you use for your own swing?
Do your friends know it?
No. Because I've been at this a long time. I've got my own.
Okay, if nobody knows it but you, but you're gonna remember it, it's a good shot at a passphrase.
Interesting.
So, why kill passwords? Passphrases are kind of a weak 2-factor authentication. A file isn't really a thing, but it's better than just a password. There is the SSH breaking cloud. Now, I want to be clear on this Hail Mary cloud. People use hosts they break into as more bots. They use it for computing purposes. They use machines they take over as DDoS traffic generators. So, am I saying that you are a bad person and you are making the world a worse place by not locking out this cloud? Yes. Yes, I am saying that. Kill your passwords. And, shutting up the smart SSH scanners is nice because you do read your logs, don't you? So, about now people ask about, okay.
There you go.
Are we, someone, oh, too bad, someone called.
About now, everybody's complaining about that. Your passphrases are way too long to type every time.
Yes,
Perfect slide for that.
yes, absolutely. Your passphrase should be too long for you to type every time you want to copy something from one machine to another. That's where an agent comes in. An SSH agent takes your key file, accepts your passphrase, and stores the decrypted private key in memory, never to disk. It specifically never swaps it out, never pages it out. When you SSH to a host, the SSH client asks the agent for your key. The slide is wrong. So you can type your passphrase once and use it all day. This means you never type a password to log into any of your regular machines, except for the machine that belongs to a customer where your account name is Jerkface. So, there are risks to using an agent. How much time have I got?
30 minutes, 35.
30, okay.
We do have giveaways.
When you walk away from your machine, lock your desktop or tell your agent to flush the key from memory. Because you don't want someone, Brian, to come walking up to your machine and log in and just to fix something quickly. On a multi-user machine,
You came in touchy, you'll be like,
if you have your agent running on a multi-user machine, you know, some of us remember one computer, 30 hardwired terminals around it. You probably don't, and some of you probably still have one of those running somewhere. You probably don't want to use an agent there. And you've got to be careful about other sysadmins breaking into your machine and messing with you. Not that I have ever done that, but. So.
Drawing line?
Copy your key to the file, home .ssh authorized keys, readable by everyone. Remember, this is a public key, but it should not be writable by anyone but you. Do not copy and paste your public key, because your copy and paste will screw something up and it won't work. So use a proper SSH copy tool to do that. Or there is a little script, SSH copy ID, included with OpenSSH that you can use to copy the key around.
Why will copy and paste change the,
Often, the copy and paste will
maybe
add a character somewhere in the
space or
middle,
something?
change a space, and you're doomed.
Line feed.
Line feeds.
But if you're careful with it, you could use copy paste if you don't get the extra space.
If you're careful with it, in theory you could. However, I've lost count of how many support calls I have been on the receiving end of, where I say, no, we're going to copy your key again. No, don't copy and paste. Use fine, use SCP. And it works now. Imagine that. Thank you very much for calling support. Click.
I get you.
So don't do it. Or if you do, don't call me for support.
Right.
Because I will cut off your hands and bury your keyboard.
Got you.
So, the SSH keygen command for your OpenSSH client. It generates your key. It asks you for a passphrase. You enter the passphrase twice. It creates the file with sensible settings for the age of the client you are using. It picks it up automatically. It says, oh, hey, here's a key file. Enter the passphrase. Boom, you're in. Now, the agent combined with a Unix window manager can be weird. You may have to start a shell. You may have to start the agent before starting your window manager. It depends entirely on how your breed of Unix is glued together.
Modern Linux is just take care of it for you.
Modern Linuxes mostly do, except when they don't. And when they don't, they will drive you to madness.
What's the cause of Linux systems and
What's the modern?
Well, Ubuntu and
Yeah.
Yes, the Red Hat one.
I didn't catch
Fedora.
that.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I didn't catch that.
Ubuntu and Red Hat usually take care of it for you. I'm going to say usually because sometimes it doesn't happen.
Well, there's one special case with Ubuntu that I've run into where if you have all of your keys in your .ssh directory, you can run into a situation where it will stop trying keys because you'll have tried your 6 keys or whatever in that directory. Because what it will do is it'll load everything up initially into the agent, so you won't necessarily have control over what order any of those keys get tried on the remote system, which can be a real pain in the tuchus.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, that kind of answered my
It
question.
gets even more fun when you use like SSH libraries, like libSSH,
Yeah.
libSSH2.
Terrible things can happen with this, just so you're aware. So, this slide included notes just for Jeff. There's a PuTTY program, PuTTYgen. It's a Windows GUI. Click, click, generate, wiggle the mouse for entropy, not that that really helps.
It amuses the cats.
It does amuse the cats, that's a benefit. Select the conversion, export OpenSSH key. This gives you your public key. You have no choice but to copy and paste this. Be very, as you suggested, be very careful. So, the first time you try using a key and you've uploaded the public key to the server, try it without an agent. Make sure the key itself works, that you didn't botch the copy, that key authentication is actually enabled on the server. It comes that way by default, unless your vendor hates you. I'm not going to name names here or anything like that, because for me to shout out AIX would just be rude.
Right, so just as a note, last month we did a thing on the using the Amazon Web Services.
Yes.
Went through some of the PuTTY and PuTTYgen stuff.
Yeah.
And that's recorded and put out onto YouTube. So
Oh,
go
cool.
back to our previous stuff if you want more information.
They have a nice tutorial for our audience at home for last month on PuTTYgen and Amazon. So PuTTY's agent is called Pagent. You enable it in PuTTY. And you can start, if you have a Windows box, you can create a startup shortcut that loads your key at boot, which is what I do for my Windows box. Okay, now let's talk about key files in general. Making a key file is not a one-time thing. At a minimum, you should use 1 key per client machine.
Don't share them.
Do not share them between machines. Do not share them with other people. Now, I have this thing where I go through a laptop a year because they are flimsy and chintzy, and what I really need is a 17-inch laptop made by DeWalt. So, every time I get a new laptop, and now that I'm doing a lot more test work at home, I have an OS X machine on my desktop, I have Windows, I have FreeBSD, I have OpenBSD. I have some virtual machines running with lesser operating systems. But every one of those that I use as a client has its own key. Because when I destroy that machine, I remove that key from all the hosts that it could connect to. Because over time, I created a key to get access to the FreeBSD project back in 1999. If I had kept that key and still used it everywhere, that key would be crackable by the slowest smartphone in this room in about a sneeze. by creating a new key for every machine. I'm pretty current and up to date. What's the oldest client machine we have in the room? I mean, a realistic day-to-day machine, not the VAX you boot every 5 years as a stunt. 5 years? Anyone have a machine older than 5 years?
This one is.
Okay. That is a well-loved laptop.
It is.
You should probably update your SSH client software at some time and create a new key. But for most of us, couple, 2-3 years, new machine, if we're professionals, new machine, new client keys. Oh, and when you create a key, make sure you use the note field to say which machine this key belongs to. Because otherwise you have an authorized key file that contains dozens of keys and you have no idea which are actually relevant. So, once you get through and you know your key auth works, turn off passwords in SSHD. This will shut up the cloud. You turn off challenge response, turn off password auth. PuTTY authentication should already be on. There are questions about using PAM, yes or no, with SSH. I say questions, what I really mean is argument. If you're using PAM, if you are using PAM features, then use PAM. There was a recent security issue between OpenSSH and PAM that gave some trouble for FreeBSD systems. Now the OpenSSH developers are not afraid to call something a bug. They will happily say something was stupid, whether it's them or someone else. And this particular problem they classified as an oversight. So you do increase your attack surface by having PAM available. It rarely turns out badly, but it can.
You need it? Yeah. No.
Yeah. So everybody has someone who can't be bothered to enable, to come up with keys to log into the system. My last job, it was one of the company owners who's going to get to it sometime. And it wasn't who you think it was.
It's not Mr. J.
Oh, I know who.
So, for this one user, you can go in your SSHD and say, okay, this subnet, you can't do it on a per user basis, but you can per subnet. Or better still, you give that person's client PC a static IP. And you allow passwords there. So, one interesting thing is agent forwarding. Once you've logged into a machine, you can send requests for your SSH agent back to your client. This means you can log into one machine, SSH from there to another, and then to another. All by sending the requests for the private key back to your desktop. So you never have to send your private key elsewhere. This makes it easy to say copy files from one machine to another. Now, SSH agent forwarding works by creating a socket on the machine. Anyone who can access the socket can access your agent and send requests. So the question on all of these intermediate machines is, do you trust root? Do you trust the machine? That is a question for your network. You do have to enable forwarding. Now, to be honest, I enable forwarding because my network is small and wussy. At some large enterprises, there are reasons not to do it. Okay, any questions so far on that? Okay, let's talk about port forwarding. We're going to go over this very clearly, very briefly. Port forwarding is the big kahuna of SSH. It is what makes SSH so powerful. It is what makes the security auditor twitch whenever the word comes up. And it's why us network and server types love it, because we can just tinker toy stuff together. So, whatever your organization is, obey their security policy. I am not responsible for you getting walked to the door by 2 silverback gorillas who have an attitude with you. Although I do want to hear all about it. Okay, 3 types of port forwarding. Local port forwarding. You grab a port on the local machine and you attach it to a remote host. For example, at one point my website did not have an SSL cert. I'm using WordPress. WordPress for administration needs a username and password. And at the time, SSL certs still cost something close to real money. It was more than lunch. So what I did is I used SSH local port forwarding, and I forwarded port 443 on my machine to port 443 on my web server, all over SSH. And then I open up my web browser and do https://127.001. And hey, I'm accessing my web server. The traffic is encrypted over SSH and being passed to that remote port. So local port forwarding lets you encrypt a service that isn't normally encrypted on a machine that you can SSH to. I even know someone who, God help us all, used local port forwarding to encrypt Telnet. The reasons for that were entirely political.
I'd like to hear just a little about that. What is
We're a little-
political?
Some people don't want to update, and they have the power in the organization that they don't have to.
I see.
So, yeah. Remote port forwarding. You grab a port on a remote machine and you attach it to your SSH client. This is where you are, say, behind your company firewall at your UNIX workstation. And you log onto your personal server out on the internet. And you forward port 222 on that machine to port 22 back on your workstation inside the firewall. You leave that session up, running in the background, you lock your workstation, and you drive home. That evening, you log into your web server and SSH to port 222 on your web server and get poured through your still open SSH connection back through all the layers of security into the corporate organization. This is an incredibly powerful tool. Use it wisely. If you happen to work at Ford Motor Company, I'm going to advise you not to use it.
What do they do?
You get them big gorillas.
Well, I don't know, but I'm sure we'll find out if it happens.
The gorilla's name is Chris.
Give us back there and think.
Don't piss him off.
I've seen some things used with proper authorization. I mean, you have to go through say what the risk is, and qualifying
yes.
it, documenting it, all that type of thing.
Yes, if you can qualify and document it, it's a great thing. But remote port forwarding is why organizations with these big security admins and risk assessment are loath to allow outbound SSH. Because what you're really, they cannot eliminate port forwarding from SSH. It's not like It's not like web requests where they could block all CGI requests at the firewall. It's part of SSH. You can do this. And there's nothing they can do to stop it. There is no proxy. So, dynamic port forwarding is an interesting little trick which turns SSH into a SOCKS proxy. SOCKS is an old proxy protocol. If you can go to your web browser, open up network connections, and it'll give you a space to put in proxy information, and the last option is usually SOCKS. Now, my home network has this unholy kernel knowledge of my mail server and my web server, and I have things glued together all kinds of horrible ways. Because it amused me when I set it up. Now and then I need to look at my site or test my services from a different host. I have a free OpenBSD account out at Devious. I'll open up a SSH session, open up dynamic forwarding, tell it to open a SOCKS proxy on port 9999 of my laptop, tell my browser to use that and use the remote DNS, and it will funnel my web request out to that remote machine that has nothing to do with me, and turn around and send it to my web server like I'm coming from a whole different network. Very useful for remote testing. And many programs speak SOCKS. So, and that is the end of the talk. And my missus and Joseph Atkinson, who is a FreeBSD developer, insists that I have to say, buy my books, all of my books. So, with 5 minutes left, are there any questions?
How much do your books cost? Can you give us a little bit more about that?
That's a good one.
Well, my books cost varying amounts. Anything from $10 for an ebook to $60 for some of the big, thick textbook type things. And I can give you a more detailed price list later. Yes, I have a box of books. And in fact, speaking of giveaways, I have a giveaway. For the person who can tell me, let's see. Right there. Here's a copy of my SSH book. Let's see, I asked, do we have anyone still using rlogin, RCP outside of the lab? You lab idiots don't count. How about Telnet?
For mail servers.
No. Mail servers don't count.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Telnetting to port 25 does not count.
Okay.
Telnet servers and
Telnet server to get a command
I hate
line.
to say it, but old HP printers, you still.
They're
Okay, we have a winner.
I'm proud of it.
You're not proud of it, but what's your name, sir?
Jeremy,
Jeremy.
I actually have that, so if you want to give that to somebody else.
Oh, well. Okay. The internet, Jeremy has just admitted he still uses Telnet, and he already owns the book. Shame him twice.
What do you use Telnet for, out of curiosity?
It's not a micro.
Okay.
Because I have to.
Oh, we have another hand. Yes.
So I work at Merit Networks, and the head of IT told me recently that they use Telnet everywhere in a safe area.
What?
Apparently, he's never heard of layered security.
Okay. So, I'm not gonna repeat the name of the organization for the camera, but your boss is using Telnet in a safe area. You do not win this book. Your boss does. And good luck. Anything else? Thank you, I'm out.
Thank you.
Nicely done.